But lead in?
Yes, are you ready?
Yes.
Yes, sounds good. I want to start by saying thank you for joining us today in the studio, Yuliia. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Good as always. Yeah. The weather is not perfect in Copenhagen, but it's still good.
Yeah, it's Danish summer. You really can't tell. Some weeks are just amazing and they're really warm. When we were in here last week, it was super warm, but today is actually a bit more comfortable. I think I actually like it when it's a bit colder, even during the summer, because it's just uncomfortable when it's too hot, especially if you're indoors.
I agree.
But I thought that maybe you wanted to start by introducing yourself and where you come from and what you do. You can just say whatever you want.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Yulia. I originally came from Ukraine, Kiev. I've been living in Denmark now for almost 4 years. And before that, I used to live in Boston and a little bit in Japan. So traveled all around the world a little bit. And I started my career as a biologist. So I'm educated in molecular biology and cell biology. But I would say I stepped quite far away from that background now, I think. And my career is something that I think some people call squiggly career, or like I would even say not a career, but a pathway, because I think I've done so many different things that, yeah, it can get a bit complex, I would say. But I started by working in a lab. So I used to do experiments on mice and cells and frogs and all of those things in academia. And that moved into more commercial space, first in the biology space. And then I actually ended up going to the business school and working for Microsoft. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me and a little bit changing my life, I would say. But in a way that I realized that I'm really not wanting to work in a corporate setting for my whole life. And I think beautiful things happened after that. I've been so happy that happened. And this was the time when we met right after I quit work at Microsoft and decided to join Antler, which is the program for the entrepreneurs at the very early stage. I don't know if you've shared with the audience what Antler is, so I'm not gonna repeat that. But yeah, quit my job, tried my best in those 3 months to create a startup, failed, which is totally fine. But I think that those 3 months of freedom, they really made me realize that I'm not going back.
Mm.
And since then, I've never regretted that decision.
Mm.
So since that moment, I think what I took from Antler is the whole startup world and how the startup functions, I would say, under the hood in terms of financing, in terms of progress and business model. And then I took that knowledge to find a startup that I would really want to join. So that was my strategy after Antler. And I've used their metrics of assessments, of how if startup has a unicorn potential to find my next opportunity. And this is how I landed in a company where I'm working right now, which is called Evito Health. I'm leading and managing business development affairs in a company, but it is a software as a medical device company where we help people diagnose liver disease at an early time point with the help of a mixture of machine learning and some other technologies. So I think it's really exciting in the space of preventive healthcare and diagnostics. So this is one part of my life, I would say more professional part. And at the same time, I think the reason why I'm also here, I've been running a non-profit organization in the last 7-8 months now. I founded in January 2025, which is called She Invests. And She Invests is a space for women to meet in person and to connect around the topic of investing and money management. So this is kind of a brief recap of who I am.
Very good. I really like the term, the squiggly line thing. And also I think that a lot of people might think of it, when you think of a career, you usually think of a straight line, right? You kind of start somewhere and you go up. But I think it's very much a strength to go from one thing to the other, because you learn so much by doing different things. And I'm sure that, I mean, in biology, you found many things that you can apply to all areas of life, for example. And typically, okay, this is a bit mathematical, but this is something that I thought about. Yeah, I think you're going to like this. Typically, when you learn something, the curve is quite steep in the beginning. In the gym, you talk of beginner gains. In the beginning, you typically learn a lot, and then you reach kind of like a plateau, and then not much happens. So if you do the same thing for a long time, in the beginning, you learn a ton of stuff about that, right? But as time goes on, you kind of hit this plateau, and I think I'm a bit like you in this way, because I feel that sometimes maybe it gets a bit boring, you know, if you do the same thing for a long time, because it's really at the start when you're kind of dipping your toes into something. I at least I find that very interesting. I don't know what your experience has been. I mean, trying out all these different fields. Have you ever thought about this?
For sure. I think there is several aspects to that. And I think that right now we can also see how the older generation, which used to work for years and years at their jobs, how they perceive our younger generation that is really used to hopping jobs like 1 2 years at one role, 1 2 years at another role, switching different industries, and so on and so forth. And honestly speaking, I think there is a little bit of shame even for people, who are hopping the jobs and changing their projects all the time. And I think it's a shame that there is this shame, because I think there's so much power in generalists and so many transferable skills that can be used in different industries. And there's two kind of people groups or types of people, where you have those people that go really really deep into something, and I think that is very valuable. And then there's also people who are generalists, who want to learn from different industries and then maybe aggregate that knowledge and use it in then what they do next. And I think that is beautiful. So I actually think that people should realize that it's not really a bad thing to do that if it's in your nature, and if you really enjoy always having a new challenge ahead of you. I think this is very valuable. And to be honest, right now I see that it was a big advantage for me, because I've mentioned I work in a company at my day job, which is a combination of biology. It's also a combination of sales, because I do business development, and it is a tech company because we have a machine learning based software. Well, funny enough, I studied biology, then I did sales in tech companies, and then I worked at Microsoft, where I learned a ton about machine learning and AI. So now kind of it all came together, and I haven't expected that, but I think it's actually a perfect match. And on top of that, my experience with Antler, that someone would say, okay, I left the work and actually did this weird thing for 3 months. Even this helped me, because I work in a very young startup where, I'm my own boss and I take the responsibility and drive things forward. So in a way, I think I'm in a perfect spot where everything kind of contributed to that, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, there are these serendipitous moments, but I'm a big believer of the fact that you make your own luck. I mean, obviously you've tried many different things, and okay, you can say that this is just lucky that you studied biology, you ended up with a biology job, and you had some sales experience. But at the same time, the more things you do, the more kind of luck you create, if you see what I'm saying. Because like, if you have a broad variety of experience under your belt, I mean, you're gonna fit into more roles, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Do you like your current job at Avita Health?
I love it.
Perfect. Easy, no further questions. Yeah, I mean, you've kind of come full circle, I guess, because you started in biology, you dipped your toes in the corporate world, and now you're in this kind of startup and working with the biology again, right? And I think that the field of predictive health, to me, is the next step in healthcare. I have a brother who's a medical doctor, and when he talks about how patients are treated, it's like, it's very, in lack of a better word, reactive. And I think that most people with very small means can do a very big difference in the way they feel. But I think that if you take it one notch above that and you go to predictive healthcare, where you can kind of look at the data, you can look at the biomarkers, and you can see, I mean, way more than you could if you just looked at, I don't know, blood pressure and weight, for example. I don't know. Did you say it was liver marker something?
It is something called MASH, or metabolic associated steatohepatitis.
Okay, nice.
In easy words, this is the disease that comes from fatty liver. So when fat, you probably know about, how it's called? I forgot the word, but
fatty liver is fibrosis.
Yeah, fibrosis. But I wanted to start with, we have now so many people with obesity. I think looking at latest rankings, it was around 50% of population now are on edge of their obesity with that BMI that is over the top.
Really?
And I saw that and I was really shocked. And 80% of people who have obesity, they have risk factors and they will develop the first stage of fatty liver, which will then in several decades, and that is a very long time, but asymptomatically develop into something called fibrosis, which is basically a scarring of liver tissue. So if you imagine the same scars you see on skin, that is the same process that is going on in the liver, with a problem that if you have the scar tissue, then that tissue is not functioning. So the more scar tissue takes over your liver, the less liver function you have. And then at some point, there is just the point of no return where the patient cannot be treated anymore. And there has to be liver transplantation, which is a very complex, problem. And there's also so many patients waiting for liver transplantation. But the interesting thing is that if you would just diagnose that a bit earlier, then actually the disease often can be reversed by just lifestyle intervention. So simple things like adding sports and activity to your daily routine, fixing your diet can really help to reverse that process even from the early stages of fibrosis. And this is where we thought we need to do something with data because it's asymptomatic. So people walk around their whole life, 20 years, they have that disease and they have no clue they have that disease. So there has to be something, collecting that data in order to diagnose it. And I think something that brought me into this space, because my startup at Entler, it was also related to preventive healthcare. And how I see it is that right now we use so much data when we want to, for example, do predictive maintenance of machines. We collect all types of data, we apply all types of algorithms, and we have this sophisticated system to predict when this fridge in a retail shop is going to break down. I don't know.
No.
At the same time, we have so much data about businesses, some kind of health of your sales cycle, how is your business doing, or how is your financial flow in the business doing, which also uses all the sophisticated algorithm. But when it comes to our own health, our data capabilities are really not on the same level. And I think that has to be changed. I think that we need to basically apply the same logic. We need to collect data and we need to observe trends, and then we need to make insights of that data. And that is exactly what we do at Avido Health when it comes to liver and when it comes to blood tests data. So we analyze the data from blood tests and then we make a prediction of a stage of a liver disease.
Do you think that people feel empowered when they have data? I mean, I, like many others, we track everything. And I had this thought recently that sometimes you can feel overwhelmed. And I had this idea that maybe the way we kind of interpret or we present the data is actually as important, if not more important, because I would imagine that, for example, let's just say BMI and maybe some liver marker, I don't actually know the term, for example, would probably be a quite good indication of if you are at risk for liver cirrhosis or fibrosis or anything. Is that something you think about too? That how do we present the data we have? Because you can collect all sorts of data on someone, and I would imagine that you get quite far maybe with just a few, let's say, numbers or something.
definitely makes the difference. And I think for both patients or just people who, like us, who maybe track their data on Oura Ring or Apple Watch, but also for healthcare professionals. Because if you don't package the data in a way that could be easily interpreted, honestly, no one is going to use it. If you're going to show some data statistical model to the doctor, they couldn't care less. GP has 7 minutes on average to see a patient. What do you want from them?
Yep.
So very often you need to make it as actionable and as simple as you could possibly. And in our case, it's actually quite funny. We're a fully backend solution, so it's just one line.
Okay.
You have name, which is called Liver Pro, and you have the output. That's it. And they can just order that output and they will receive it as a regular blood test. So that's the whole idea behind, simplicity of how to make sense of the data that you see. But I think the same trend I could see with people who have like Apple Watch, as I mentioned, and Oura Ring and all those tracking devices. I think sometimes it can cause anxiety because you don't really know how to interpret that data and what to do with that, and it kind of piles up, but you cannot really do much unless you are a really nerd and you're investigating that space and maybe reading some research. So yeah, I think there's still a lot to be done about how can we bring that data to people, just like me and you in their daily lives.
I mean, it is a super interesting field. I mean, I would imagine that all sorts of startups are doing anything. I mean, predictive health is something I hear it at least every week. People on LinkedIn and like Reddit and all these places talk about you can really do, I think, so much. I mean, other than these liver markers, what do you think? Let's say 5 to 10 years time in like predictive health. Is there anything you're looking out for, like specifically, that you think is going to play a big role?
That's a very good question. I am, of course, cancer. I have to say the whole disease space in oncology right now, there are some solutions where you can diagnose cancer at very early stages just by doing a blood test and applying algorithms to that. So I think that is a huge, area where it is developing and where maybe I don't want to say low-hanging difference can be made, but maybe some frontline developments I think are going to be done in the next 5 to 10 years. Genetical diseases, because this is kind of data I think that now we learned how to collect with the sequencing and different tests that are becoming more and more cheap right now. And maybe something that is a bit more a passion for me. I'm very much into longevity and aging space. And I also am a fan of Brian Johnson. I don't know if I should be ashamed of that or not. Well, I think that he does more good than bad, and of course he's a little bit extreme. But I love how, he just has this simple things that you can incorporate, like sleep and good eating habits. But I think that what he does, collecting the biomarker data about himself, trying to understand his biological age, of his body, not just the age, how many years we've lived, and then doing something about that. I really hope that this is the area where a lot of development is going to happen. Maybe we can model in some ways, if we do this decision today, how can it impact our life in 20 years? I think that would be so interesting and also helpful for us to take best decisions, not just in short term, but also in long term. And I think AI can play a huge role in this. I think it's a little bit scary at the same time, because if we start just doing what AI says, this is a little bit of a separate topic for discussion.
Yes.
But I think that if we treat this responsibly, it can make a huge improvement on our lives.
So Brian Johnson has obviously said many things, but he thinks he can reach a stage where he will never die. He will just be able to replaces organs and change many like different things.
I don't believe in that.
No, I don't. I was about to
To
say.
be honest.
I saw a super interesting statistic the other day. It's that for the last 50 years, the average lifespan has been going up every single year. People 50 years ago, they had an average lifespan of 60 odd years.
Mm-hmm.
In Denmark, I think it's 80 something. So we have a 20-year addition to the average lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
But the max lifespan, so if you look at the oldest people 50 years ago, they are the same age as the oldest people today.
Mm-hmm.
There seems to be some kind of a ceiling.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
you can't, you can raise the average, but there is a hard kind of limit to it. And it really made me think, like, it seems like it's not just a difference of degree, but it's a difference in kind we need to do. And I think that maybe if we see a major breakthrough, I mean, there are breakthroughs all the time these days. There's, you know, not just AI, but all these things. Do you think that we could, you know, live longer than those 122 years that the oldest person has ever lived using, you know, cutting edge technology and then replacing organs and everything? I mean, there's also the telomeres, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, the telomeres, they divide and you can't put them back together again.
No. So there's talking about the ceiling. I think that is exactly the ceiling that is incorporated in our DNA. I think that if we look at Brian Johnson, he treats aging just as wear and tear of his body, and he is kind of treating those symptoms and the causes of wear and tear. But it is not just that. Like, come on, if we look at plants, if we look at animals, if we look at all living creatures around the world, they have their certain lifespan that is programmed through their DNA, and we are not an exception. So I think in order to break that ceiling, we'll have to really look into genetics and genomics and, you know, make some breakthrough there. I think we're still pretty far away from that, to be honest.
Do you think it would be a good thing?
That's, you know, that is a good question, because it depends on how widespread it is, and it depends on who are the people that would benefit from that. And of course, many people think, and it's logical, that it will be the elite that will benefit from that first. And will they share it? Will they democratize it? That's a very good question, right? We don't really know. And it also, I think, affects population size on this earth, right? So I think that if it's going to happen, then the structure of our society is going to change so much. Like, it's not really clear what's going to happen. So I don't think I have a clear opinion about that. But at the same time, imagine that our society consists of only old people, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be crazy. I don't think it's a healthy society, to be honest. If we're going to be able to freeze in that state of being 30, 40, even 50, you know, that's a different conversation. But if we're going to live forever, but our body will still develop certain symptoms of aging, I don't think that is worth it, and I don't think that's going to be healthy, to be honest.
What about new ideas? Because, like, I think it was Max Planck. It was one of the old early 20th century physicists, and he said science progresses one funeral at a time. The old guard has to die for the young newcomers to step up and bring in new, fresh ideas. That's what I'm kind of worried about. If people live forever, and we see already today in America that the politicians are very old, and they stick to their ways. We do that. We stick to our ways. True. Yeah. So I worry that if we live in a society where people can just go on living forever, you need this influx of new things, because power tends to kind of accumulate over a lifetime. Investments, among other things.
Yes.
So I would worry that we would stagnate as a society and we wouldn't progress anymore.
Yeah. I also have to say, I think a lot about things that are natural and, you know, are incorporated by nature, and what is a part of our natural evolution versus artificial evolution, so to say, where humans just came up with certain concepts and, you know, I don't know, just like society we live in. And I think that would be completely unnatural.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? Like,
yeah.
It's, I think that, I mean, death has a bad rap. You know, it's there's, at least to me, a kind of feeling of philosophical security in a way, to know that, you're going to die one day. I don't know.
Security.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because it kind of means that the time we have now is special.
Yeah.
If it went on forever, would we treasure it the same way?
No,
I
I
mean,
don't think so. What
yeah.
about motivation?
What about motivation?
All
Exactly.
of those things,
Yeah.
Many people, and including myself, they get it exactly from the feeling that the time is not endless. So I don't know if I would just have all the time in the world, if I would do it with the same, let's say, ambition and pace that I'm trying to do things right now.
Yeah.
So, but I think, at some point we might cross that line of not having natural evolution anymore. And
CRISPR.
yes, and I think that can be a little scary. And maybe we have already crossed that line. I don't know. But at the same time, we are created by nature. So one could argue that everything we do is a natural evolution. I think it's a very philosophical debate we are starting. So.
Yes. I want to ask about She Invests. Where did the idea come from for She Invests?
Honestly, very simple. So I've been investing myself on and off for maybe last 7 years. And just for the reference, I'm fairly young. I'm 24 now. And I started when I was 17 back in Ukraine. And it has helped me to accumulate savings for very important periods in my life. Like life-changing periods where I really needed a lot. And my family couldn't really provide that for me. So I had to help myself. And as I had that interest, I was reading, and just in general, I treat investing not just as a way of accumulating money, but also intellectual exercise. I really enjoy this, reading about different ways and strategies. And I realized that I do feel lonely in that. My boyfriend doesn't like investing, and my family doesn't invest. And before I raised this topic among my friends, nobody was talking to me about investing. There was perhaps 2-3 people in my life that talked to me about this first. But otherwise, no. And apart from those 3 people were all men. So it's not like I could relate to them. It was more that I was like, okay, they do this, it works for them, I'm gonna do this as well. So this is why I started investing. I was really liking women in my life to talk about it. And I was like, okay, why not to create something that would gather those women together? So I started by actually just inviting all of my female friends and friends of their friends for like this big dinner when we ordered a lot of sushi and wine. Actually, it was hosted at Antler, funny enough. And I created this kind of networking exercise with many questions that I've distributed and split them into groups. So they discussed those questions about investing, and they changed groups once in a while so they could talk to many people. And I think that was so fun. And I think that was so successful. And I've learned so much about my friends that I had no clue about. I was like, people that I've known for years, they are like spending hours every day on this. And they have never mentioned that. And I was like, this is crazy, isn't it? So we actually just need a reason to come together and to discuss those things. So I've decided to make She Invests that reason, for people to come together. And what is very important for me, come together physically. So gather in one building, in one room, and talk about this. What's been your success? What's been your failure? What do you do? And what can I learn from you? And what can you learn from me? So this is the whole idea and reason.
Any of the questions you remember from that first initial meetup? Any of the questions that stood out that...
I think it was always interesting to learn what people invest in, because sometimes we restrict ourselves to like stocks and funds, which is the most widespread things. But then I had that friend that invested into Chanel bags. And I was like, I didn't know that is a strategy. But apparently Chanel bags on the secondhand market are 3 times more expensive than original Chanel bags in a shop.
Why?
Which doesn't make any sense, but because of exclusivity. And she got access to the shops where she could get a very rare model of a Chanel bag, and then she sold it with like plus 40%. And then she just started building connections around that and, reselling those bags. And I'm like, okay, even compared to stocks, that is actually a very valid strategy, So I think that it was interesting to learn and broaden my perspective on what investing is in general and what assets do we have. But I was so excited to learn about, one of them was investing so much in green infrastructure. Another was investing in crypto. Someone was investing in gold and uranium. Someone in bags. And I was like, and you, my friends, were keeping silent about this. That is unfair.
What do you think makes for a good investment?
That depends on the preference, I think, and on financial goals. I can talk about myself, my personal opinion and preference. I prefer stocks and I prefer funds, but I prefer more stocks. And that is because I see investing in companies as continuation of my business development and startup interest. I really enjoy learning about business models that are sustainable and generating successful, profits. I really enjoy learning about mods in businesses as well, and just the successful cases of businesses. So for me, it's kind of a non-brainer that this is what I understand, and this is what I don't see as a struggle on the side of my main job. I can actually learn something by reading an annual report that I can apply in my job. And I think this is cool how it all combines together. And in addition, I would call myself a value investor because I invest on a very long term. Maybe I never sell within my lifespan. So I have a very much Warren Buffett approach. I don't know, maybe it's simple, but I invest in simple businesses that are easy to understand, that are predictable, and I hope to invest into them forever.
How do you find them?
Many ways. Mostly by networking and seeing what other people invest in. I look sometimes at transactions of different funds and of different prominent value investors. I know several value investors that I really admire in my own circle, so I also respect their opinion quite a lot. And of course, do certain research and analysis on top of that. But often I use ideas of other people as that initial idea.
That is okay.
Yeah. I really trying to make it simple and not trying to make it inventing a wheel. It makes me feel more secure about my money that I've invested. But of course, sometimes just internet and maybe a new strategy that actually I've started recently thinking about. Because in value investing, at least the strategy that I have is to invest into established brands and into things that, let's say, we cannot live without. So recent thing I started doing is actually just looking around. What do I wear? What do I use daily? What can't I imagine my life without, and my friends and people in my circle? And then I started looking up, okay, who produces that? And how did it happen that everyone uses that? So for example, one of the people I know who is an owner of a fund, he did the same by spotting that all nurses wear Crocs. And then he looked up Crocs, and that was a great investment case. It was undervalued, and it has really great brand, well known around the whole world. So yeah, that's been interesting.
Do you think it's important to understand what you invest in? Some of the things you said, uranium and Chanel bags, used Chanel bags, and some people invest in crypto. But, I really like the simplicity, of investing in things. Do you think it's important to understand what you invest in?
I think it's very important. I would never invest into something that I do not understand. But I'm also a very anxious person.
Maybe that's a good thing to be when you're investing.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually feel that I'm quite risky, I invest quite aggressively, a big proportion of my income. But when I did one of those financial profile tests, it told me that I'm very risk averse. That was surprising to me. But I think that is very, very, very important. And I think that if you don't want to spend time on learning about stocks and, fundamentals and crypto, whatever you want to invest in, then I think people should just learn about like indexes and something very simple, very stable that has been proven through hundreds of years, and just invest into that. I'm really inspired. I've listened to that podcast. I don't really remember what was that. But there was this story about stupid money. And when stupid money acknowledges that it's stupid, it stops being stupid. So there was this story, I think, about a janitor in the US that was investing $100 a month, every month. And then I think by his 80th or something, he accumulated millions just because he was doing something that is called dollar averaging. So he was investing the same amount every month, regardless of where the market is. He was just investing into indexes or like funds, and he just did it his whole life. And then he left this huge legacy to his family. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. That's, yeah. I wanted to ask you something else as well. You said before that all the people you knew who talked about investing were men. Why do you think that is? Because you could think that men and women invest, or men invest as much as women and women invest as much as men, but maybe men just talk more about it, for example. That could be one explanation.
I don't think women invest as much as men yet.
Why?
Unfortunately. I think it's a part of history, just because it's actually not that long time as women became independent financially. If you look back in the mid of 20th century, so many women, they were just sitting at home, washing dishes, making soup. I don't think it's bad if it's your active choice, If it's active choice, that's fine. But it's a big journey from that to, taking ownership of your life, your future, your financial goals. And where I come from in Ukraine, it's still often the case. So when I was in Ukraine, I think it was so rare that people invested in my circle, especially girls. Here, of course, it's much more frequent, I think, now. And in the last couple of years, I also think it's been a bit of a hype. So there's a lot of awareness. But just in general, I think many women are quite low risk tolerant. I think we're wired in a way to be sure about things, to keep things safe, and of course I don't want to generalize, but that's at least have been my observations. And I think that doesn't let them really risk it, because of course investment is risky. You may never see your money again, and you need to understand that. And I think many women cannot accept that.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. To be honest, I have no idea why we cannot do that. Maybe there is something in, worldview or, again, cultural legacy. Also because I can accept it. That's why I don't know. And I cannot understand it. Yeah. And then there was another part of that, what I wanted to mention. But now I don't remember.
That's okay. I think that you can make an argument for that being risk averse might be a good thing for investing, because typically you hear of the success stories of people who invest a lot of money and maybe it goes really well, really fast. But for every winner, there are a lot of losers.
Yeah.
So you could make an argument that maybe it's better to be risk averse and pick the safe option, So maybe women are better investors than men. I don't know.
I actually saw some statistic that showed that if you compare profits of women, individual investors, versus men, in average they're higher than for men. And I think that is exactly because women diversify, women are risk averse, they don't necessarily invest all of their money into that crypto coin that is underexplored or something. Some do, again, not generalizing.
No.
But yeah, I think they're a bit more grounded and calm often, which can help in this situation. But I also think we shouldn't let it stop us from investing. And, I have some friends that were still in this mindset that it's safer to keep money in the bank than to invest them. And I think many people in general and women, they don't think about the opportunity cost. And I think that opportunity cost is huge in this case. So we're perhaps afraid to lose those $100, $200, $300 we will invest on a monthly basis, but we're not afraid that when we are retired, we're not going to have enough money for retirement. And I don't understand why it is so, to be honest.
No, that's a really good question. I think people in general are risk averse. Like it hurts more to lose $1 than we're happy to get $1.
Yes.
And so it could just be that some people learn, for example, to ignore the pain of the losses. But yeah, it's a really good question. Do you think crypto coin could be a good investment though? Like, do you think that there's a case to be made for investing in crypto, even though I know it is risky?
I think, of course, and there is a lot of successful Bitcoin investors. I also recently listened to the podcast of Kathy Wood, who is the CEO of ARK Invest. It's a big innovation fund in the US. So, for example, they believe that Bitcoin is going to increase tenfold within the decade. And I think there is definitely a case to be made there. But I do not invest into crypto. And my personal opinion is that something as risky and something as innovative as crypto, it's for when you have a capital and when you're ready to risk. It's not for the beginning, unless you want to try to make a big buck in like 2 years or something. I think if you're oriented on long-term growth, then you should start adding that risky diversification maybe a bit later when you're a bit more established and you can truly afford to lose and absorb that risk. I don't think that if you just started investing, it makes a lot of sense to just, invest heavily into crypto. But that's my case.
For someone listening to this and they want to start investing, let's say that there's a woman, she's never heard of She Invests and she wants to get into investing. Where is a good place to start? Where's the safe kind of, the easiest way to dip your toes into investing?
I think definitely funds is one of the easiest things. If you look at Dow Jones World Index, or if you look at S&P 500, then just adding the same small amount of money every month into funds. This is kind of I want to say foolproof way. Of course, it is not foolproof because there is still risk involved, but I think it is one of the lowest risks that you can have by investing into, assets. And I've even made some calculations that if you start investing $35 per month into just like a fund with an average market returns, and you leave it and you invest $35 every month until your child is around 30, by the age of 30 your child can be a millionaire.
Is that adjusted for inflation?
No. But still the power of compounding here is huge. And if you think as a parent about that, how much easier can you make the life of your child by doing that? It's just $35. I mean, here in Denmark, I think it's like going to supermarket for 1 day or for 2 days max. But it can make so much difference for someone down the line.
What about discipline? Because obviously in the long run, this is the better option. But it might be hard to kind of put the money away, because you can't access it for a long time. By the time your kid is 30, it will be many, many months where you've put this money away, and a lot of people might kind of feel like, I could never do that.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people?
I would say just treat it as a cost. You invest into yourself, you pay yourself first, and treat it as a cost in the beginning of your month or whenever you get your salary. And I think when you're getting used to that, then you stop really thinking about that in a way that it's somehow heavy burden, to invest, let's say in the end of the month when you have to control your spending so much to be able to save that amount you've wanted to save. I think everything becomes so much easier once you treat it as a cost, if you have stable income, of course. If you do not have a stable income, that is entirely different conversation.
How would you invest if you didn't have a stable income?
I think still from every income you have, you should have a certain percentage that you save up. And then I think that first, before investing, you should always have a financial safety net. And I think that is your protection from then later on selling your assets if, let's say, they're down and you really urgently need money to, I don't know, pay your rent or something like that. So it actually also helps what you said, how not to feel that you cannot do that. Because then if you always have that pool of money that can save you if you have an emergency, then you don't really treat your investments like, oh, I need that money, but they're locked from me. What a terrible thing. But yeah, I would just really take a percentage of my income, even if it's not stable, and then invest that.
What about tools? Are there any tools? So the first thing that comes to mind is obviously AI, because
Yeah.
everyone talks about AI all the time. Are there any tools? Do you think that you could use, for example, something like AI or something super simple, an automated kind of thing where you just take money out every month?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think tools and AI, like language models, they make it so much easier. And, I don't have any financial education. Everything I've learned, I learned myself. I use Perplexity. I call it often ChatGPT, but I mean Perplexity.
Yeah.
I use it every single day and I use it so much for investing. So for example, for me, if I want to be able to read an annual report, I don't understand sometimes like 70% of words in that financial lingua. I use AI to dumb it down to my level because, as I've mentioned, I really want to understand. I feel much safer if it explains it to me like I'm 5 years old, or on some examples, very simple ones, than if I just close my eyes on that and then I end up not reading that financial reports that I see. And I think that has been such a big help for me, just like being able to process any information and being able to verify any information and understand, how legit is that information. Because right now there's also tools. For example, there's one called Consensus AI. So if you want to look a little bit into research, and there's also a lot of research done in terms of investing strategies, then you can see the general scientific consensus around certain questions that you have. So for example, if you would be like, is it more successful strategy to invest into undervalued companies or, let's say, growth stocks that are already overvalued? Then you would at least see that consensus and you are able to form an opinion based on that. So I would say that is the first thing. Second, for me, I spar a lot with AI. There is this, I think, genius feature in Perplexity. It uses Warren Buffett style lingo because it's been trained on his minutes from the meetings and on his corporate letters that he has written since, like, I think 60s, right? For Berkshire Hathaway. And that it's able to spar with you on an investment idea based on that. And I was very worried first that it would be overly optimistic, because sometimes I think AI feeds you only optimistic stuff and not really objective. But I think it actually works pretty well. Like, I've fed some of my investment ideas and got some healthy criticism of that, and be like, this is the unpredictable space for regulations. I wouldn't really look at that if you want something safe. And these are often things I don't really think about. So I really appreciate the inputs, I would say, from AI. Another tool that I use now a lot, it's not a tool based on AI. I don't know, to be honest, maybe it is. It's called Alpha Spread. And it is a tool for value investors where you can see they have valuation models and they basically give you a graph of whether the stock is undervalued or overvalued relative to its assets that it owns. And I've been using that a lot to understand if now is the right time to purchase the stock, basically if it's a good deal or not. And I think before I found that tool, I found it so hard to think if it's overvalued, undervalued, do that kind of calculation myself is crazy, I think. But that tool really simplified my life in a way.
Do you think that AI will be better than humans at investing in the future?
Could be. I think that a lot of institutional investors, they're moving a lot towards passive investing with the help of technologies like AI. And I honestly don't know what it will do to markets as a general. That's we're going to see. but I think it's definitely more rational than us, and it can process so much more information than us. So I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be able to become better, with one exception: innovation. Innovation and creative mindset. I think people still can spot ideas that can be very innovative and life changing that doesn't make any logical sense, and I don't know if AI could do that. So this is something, again, I've referenced already Catherine Wood from ARK Invest. This is also something that she talks about, that it's really great, all of those AI tools that are being used, but one use case to be made for human, jobs and role in the future is innovation investing.
So there is a kind of a human touch needed for this creativity and innovation, and still, even though it feels like it's only numbers and logic and everything. So another thing that I just saw yesterday is obvious, or these last couple of days, is obviously the Novo stock. Here in Denmark, we are somewhat dependent, obviously, on how Novo does. And I mean, obviously, in the biotech sphere, what do you think is going to happen? Like, there's Eli Lilly in the US, for example, and there's only, I don't know how many years left until the patent for semaglutide runs out in the US. It also ties into longevity.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts in this area?
I'm very optimistic.
Are you?
Yes, I also bought some more Novo stocks. It's a very good moment to buy right now, I think. It's dropped, I think, another 10% today. But first of all, Novo Nordisk has such a big pipeline. Apart from semaglutide, there's CagriSema coming out, there's a lot of liver therapeutics coming out, which also kind of makes me think about that and makes me a little bit, I feel safe about understanding their business because I'm working in the same space now, and I think still the potential of weight loss drugs. Right now, maybe it's treating a couple of million patients, but I think over time it's going to be treating hundreds of million patients, and that's going to be really revolutionary. And I think with their really big pipeline of different liver therapeutics and weight loss agents, I think they're going to be a really booming and pioneering business.
Is that their moat? The pipeline? Is that the moat, the pipeline?
Well, not only. So in the obesity, there's also this thing, and I'm not a little expert in that, but Novo Nordisk is one of the earliest companies to release the weight loss drugs, and this is because they have conducted very long studies to see the long-term outcomes of their drugs. So basically, they invested like almost a decade of time to track how their drug impacts patients on a long term. And this is extremely important in terms of weight loss drugs, to see that result. And because they are at the forefront of that, and that's why they ended up on the market the earliest. And I think that as a result, that kind of innovation, front runner vibe, it's, I think Novo has it. And of course, now it's also developing some pills. So instead of injections for the weight loss, but its pipeline is also so much broader than just weight loss. It's really, there is some hematology drugs in the pipeline, liver therapeutics, all kinds of drugs. So I'm fairly secure in, the future. And of course, they have also a lot of cash to invest. And I think the return on their own cash investment has been also quite remarkable in the business. And yeah, it's actually an interesting thing that I've also learned, I would say, relatively early. It's not always the return on your own investment that matters if you assess the business. But if you really want to see how successful is business and stable, you need to look at return on their own investment within the company, and that shows a lot about their financial health. And I think Novo has it very well with that.
So you're bullish on Novo?
Yes, I am very bullish. I might be wrong.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is not investment advice, I should probably say.
I also think that market has really overreacted to Eli Lilly results. It was like a 2% difference in weight loss. So yeah, I don't think that. I think that many people, and perhaps those that don't really understand the business, they read headlines and then they panic and then they sell off, and they didn't look into like the real profitability, and they have really good performance in the last decade. They've been going only up, and that kind of reassures me.
Do you think that everyone is going to be on some kind of, maybe not semaglutide, but a similar type of drug in the future? Do you think that'll be part of longevity?
I hope not.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about many different things, investing and biotech, and it's very exciting. Is there anything that you feel like we've touched upon that, you feel like we haven't said? Anything that springs to mind?
Yeah, I think that we discussed more or less many things. I would say if I wanted to say something about investing, and you've mentioned what should you do if you want to invest, I think you should really find your tribe. I think you should find your crowd, and this will make you learn so much, and discuss this with someone, and basically try to do what other people do. Try to find someone successful in your circle and try to do what other people do. I think it's the safest option, to be honest. And I think if you learn how to invest, look at people who succeed, and then try to repeat their strategy. Do not invent the wheel unless you're a genius. And so that's kind of something that made a lot of good for me in terms of investing, but also in terms of work that I do. I think building connections is so important, and learning from other people is so important. So this is something that I would love to highlight. I think everything that I have right now just to people around me and to connections.
If people want to follow you or She Invests, where should they go?
LinkedIn.
We'll add a link.
Yes.
I'd like to say thank you, Yuliia. It's been very eye-opening. I think that a lot of people value what you do, and it's been super nice.
Thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure.
Thank you. All right.